Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you're already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I'm pleased to present two people who are old friends and who both have rich histories in and around digital music and other areas of commerce. Also, both have figured out how to strike the perfect work-life balance better than anyone you may have ever met. And I promise you will leave here today smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourself, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And also ask questions of our speakers. And finally, this is very important. Please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors for throughout their support. We could not continue to do this for free. Special thanks to MedJet, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brew Works, and my favorite industry podcast, Unlimited Supply. Before we move on, a quick note about MedJet, which is the top-rated air medical transport and security response membership program for travelers. I'm a member, and I will say I got it mostly to be able to get home if I land in a hospital somewhere. But it comes with security response too, and wow, between the cartel violence in Puerto Vallarta, a place where everyone thought was the safest tourist destination in Mexico, and what's happening in the Middle East right now, you just never know what can happen when you're traveling. So having experts to call and security extraction if necessary seems mandatory these days. So check it out at medjet.com. Let's get down to business, folks. In today's host seat, we welcome my longtime friend, Sloane Scott. She operates at the intersection of private equity, entertainment, and enterprise value. Over 3 decades, she's partnered with founder-led and PE-backed companies to drive 31 exits and 3 IPOs across media, hospitality, healthcare, and consumer brands. Her roots in entertainment shaped a core belief: markets move when stories move. Today, she works with boards, CEOs, and deal teams to sharpen positioning, align leadership, and build scalable revenue engines. Her focus is disciplined growth, defensible differentiation, and immeasurable value creation. Sloane blends profitable thinking with unreasonable hospitality, showing that performance and experience are force multipliers, not trade-offs. She builds companies to scale, integrate, and exit well. Sloane, it is an honor to have you here today. I've been chasing you to do this for years, so welcome, my friend.
Thanks, Tom.
And joining Sloane is Victor Siegel. As the Grateful Dead says, what a long, strange trip it's been. Victor's 40-year music media career started as a professional athlete and is transitioning the same way. He is currently EVP of Business and Corporate Development at All Verified, the world's largest sync licensing and royalty administration company. He describes himself as part-time CEO and aspiring ski bum. Well, he is a part-time ski instructor based in Aspen, and that part is pretty factual. He began his career as a professional equestrian and transitioned into a real career after breaking his neck at age 24. His varied resume includes 15 years as an ad executive in New York City, CEO of one of the first mobile video streaming companies in the United States, where he launched on the first music subscription service with Warner Music. Along the way, he's been turnaround CEO 5 times, head of business development for the USA Network in Latin America, ran M&A for Ladare Active, and today you can find him on the phone working before 9 a.m., teaching skiing in Aspen until 3, and back in the office after that. He also identifies himself as a dyed-in-the-wool parrothead. It is my pleasure to welcome these two rock stars to our platform today. Please take it away, Sloane.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, so Victor and I are long friends, but we haven't seen each other in a couple of years. We talk all the time, but we haven't seen each other. That's
We're
my
we're
fault
actually
because
seeing each we're actually seeing each other now.
seeing
I
each
think
other
it's I
now,
think
right?
I actually think it's I was actually going to say I actually don't think I've been the best friend. But before we get to this, I've known you for years. Your resume, you're fucking way smarter than I am. My resume doesn't sound that impressive compared to yours.
Oh, stop. Well, I wouldn't be very much of a brander if I wasn't a good writer. So, um, but I think a really good place to start would be, bring me up to speed what you've been up to. I mean, you're new in this new role, so
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
that.
Sure. Well, I also think one of the interesting things, Sloan, for both you and I think you and I have probably the most non-traditional paths
Yeah.
into not just what we're doing today, but period, right? I mean,
Yeah.
overall. So we can get to that later. So I got a call about a year and a half ago, given my background, right? So ad agency, M&A, music. So I get a phone call from a banker friend of mine about a year and a half ago who said that he was raising growth capital for this company that had reinvented the commercial sync business. And, given my background, I probably know where the capital was. Could I help him? And I said, thank you. Absolutely not. Thanks for asking, but I'd be sure happy to talk to the company. It wasn't really, I think, the answer he wanted to hear. And it turned out to be probably the fastest negotiation that I'd ever had. So
Mm,
I ended up talking to the founder and the chairman who'd come in to sort of from a growth equity standpoint. And I joined about a year and a half ago. I mean,
yeah.
probably about 15, 16 months ago. And all verified, this will be the one, Chamber of Commerce pitch for us. So all verified is the largest commercial sync royalty administration company in the world. And what do I mean by that? We manage licensing upfront of music, generally production music that it gets used in commercials and films and television. And we, on the back end, manage the royalty administration, essentially finding money that nobody's found before. So on any given day, we probably find on the royalty side, royalties are on the music side, residuals for actors anytime they're on television. We probably find, and this doesn't, it sounds hyperbolic, but it's not, anywhere from 3 to 5 times more revenue than anybody else.
Yeah.
Companies based in, we're all over the place. So when I talk in my bio about working before 9, then after 3, so we're headquartered in LA. We have our royalty admin guys in London. We have a small office in New York, and we're also based in Australia. So I'm back to being kind of a time zone junkie again.
Yeah.
But it's turned out to be super interesting.
Yeah.
Over the 18 months or so, we've acquired 6 companies. Yeah, some small tech companies, some small royalty companies. We've moved down to the film and television side. We really started in commercials. We bought a
Hmm.
company that puts us in the film and TV side, and I think probably we've raised a lot of money from some private equity guys for acquisitions. And I think probably the most interesting part is we solidified a global MSA music services agreement with Omnicom.
Mm.
So that's Omnicom spends, I can't give the exact numbers, but let's just say anywhere from $200 to $400 million on a global basis on behalf of their clients. So we are their exclusive provider, both from a licensing standpoint and a royalty admin standpoint. And obviously they picked up IPG. So it's a really big contract. So that's been really good. Then I'd say on the bad side, Sloane knows this. So ski season, and obviously my Jimmy Buffett hat, I never leave home without it. But
Yeah.
ski season ends at the end of April every year. And there's a lot of data that says that people get hurt on the last day that you ski, the last afternoon that you ski, the last run that you ski. And that tends to be tourists who are kind of maxing out their trip. I'm a ski instructor. On the last day of skiing, on the last afternoon of skiing, I have a woman who I ski with a lot. And she turned around. I said, hey, there's a big closing party at the Sun Deck. You've been up to the Sun Deck.
Yep.
And I said, let's go do one more run. We just did it.
Oh boy.
There's nobody there. Not my hyperbolic nobody there. I mean nobody there. I was skiing down and somebody came out of left field and wiped me out.
Oh
So
God.
yeah. So for the last year, I've been hobbling around like I'm 75 years old. And they finally did some MRI stuff. So I'm actually having a hip replacement done in about 6 weeks. So
Yeah, well, you're old. You were going to need one anyway. So whatever.
as as Tom said, I am old. I'm old as fuck, is for sure. So it's weird, like broke my ankle a handful of years ago, and now I'm getting a hip replacement. But other than that, life's pretty good. And you,
So,
what have you?
yeah,
Sorry, go. What have you
go
been
ahead.
up to the last year?
Oh, well, more of the same, doing the same thing I've been doing for a while. I mean, you know, the the things I'm into in the music and
Yep,
entertainment business, as most people do, right? I mean, you've still got Blue Chair,
yep,
which is still doing well. Kenny's doing dates at the Sphere again, which are,
yep.
are great.
I'm actually. I
And
was just. I was just talking to Ryder. I'm going out. I want to see Kenny, but I'm going out for the
Kenny,
Metallica
gonna see
shows in
Metallica
October.
show. Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
plug for John, who's announcing those. So, uh, our old buddy John.
Yeah.
And then, we've still got Maiden, which is, the YouTube media company, which is doing really, really well. And that's more over time. It's hard to believe it's 2026 and it's still around, but it's doing really well. I mean,
Yep.
so that's been great. And then, always working in the live event space in and around it, working with CEOs on VIP trips and working with venues. So it's fun. I was telling Tom that yesterday I was here in Nashville. I met with the former governor and he
Oh,
was doing a presentation. We were viewing the new Nissan Stadium, the new football stadium, because we're getting prepped for the Super Bowl. We're on the list for Super Bowl.
what
Yeah,
is you're on the short list or
yeah, yeah. We're on the short
nice,
list. So we're building, for
nice.
those of you listening, we're building a brand new football stadium on the riverfront, state of the art, and it'll be uh, 365 days a year. It's very similar to um, Cowboy Stadium. It's going to rival it. So it's going to be great too, because from a live music perspective, we're
Yep,
now going to
yep.
be able to book that off season much more than we could the current Nissan Stadium, which, as most of you guys know, is an outdoor. So it's great to see that. I was also talking with Tom that we're on the list for a Sphere as well. So
Right, right.
there's a lot.
It-
As you can imagine, there's a lot going on in
so,
in
so
Nashville.
where? So is the stadium being built? Because this will go back to one of our Nashville trips. So remember the night we were in Nashville and we went to see Tim play McGraw play at the
Yeah,
right at the base of the river. Right.
yeah,
It was the
it's
first
right
time.
there.
It
Yeah.
was the first
So
time
if
I
you,
heard. Got it.
yeah,
Got it.
yeah, it's right there. It's going right there. So
Yep.
one of the interesting things I think about, like, even our backgrounds, right? So you talk about what we've done now is kind of how we got here. So I'd love for you to share sort of like,
Sure.
how did you get into the music business?
Sure. Well, Tom, I'll answer the question you asked. So I found out when I was 24 that you can break your neck and not be paralyzed. So I found that out, fortunately, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So how I got music and how I became an executive is sort of a pretty circuitous route. So grew up in New York, grew up in a place called Riverdale. So Riverdale is kind of like an upscale middle class Jewish ghetto in the Bronx. And I went to school there. And as I was growing up, I did two things. I wanted to be an actor, and my mom got me into riding. So I always joke equestrian show jumping. And I always joke that there's a very small book of Jewish athletes. It's a really, really, really thin book. And there's an asterisk of famous Jewish equestrian athletes. So when I was 15 in New York, you can go to high school, and you can go to these specialized high schools. So you can go to like Bronx Science or Stuyvesant, which are for the really smart kids, which I wasn't.
Yes.
And there's performing arts and music and arts. So the high school performing arts, you probably know, is the Fame School, right?
Yeah.
And so I audition. You have to audition. They pick like one out of 40 or 50 or 100, whatever the number is. So I auditioned to get into the high school performing arts, and I was convinced. I think I've told you this. Maybe I haven't, but I thought I really screwed up my audition. And as I was walking out, you'll laugh in the second part of the story, the entire female ballerina class walked by me in tutus and tights. And I went, I have got to get into this school. So
Of course
fortunately,
you
I
did.
got it. Okay. So at the same time I was trying to be an actor, I was also riding horses. And when I turned 18 and graduated, I had to make a decision whether I was going to go to college, which I was ill prepared for, or try to be an actor or try to be an athlete. So the athlete thing seemed to be a better gig for me. So I rode horses around the States and overseas for about 6 years, and then ended up having a riding accident and broke my neck. I won't go into the whole story about that. Takes longer, but all the limbs work, as you know. So I'm 24 years old at this point. I'm a failed athlete who graduated from high school to be an actor and didn't go to college. So my prospects were not looking very healthy at that time. So I ended up moving back to New York, and I was working at a stable called Claremont, where you could rent horses and walk around Central Park. And I had no idea what I was going to do. And I meet these two guys who are in advertising. And Sloane knows this part of the story. And they said, well, you should be in advertising. I said, I didn't go to college. They said, you go to college? I said, I didn't go to college. I don't know anything. They said, do you know any college campuses? And I said, well, my girlfriend goes to Penn. They went, you went to Penn. So we spent a weekend writing a resume. I sent it out to dozens and dozens of ad agencies, and I got hired by an agency called Wells Rich Green, which is a very famous agency. Mary Wells was kind of the Don Draper, if you will, female
Yeah.
Don Draper, right? So I was in advertising for about 15 years. I ran a bunch of Procter and Gamble business and Ralston Purina business, and ended up shifting onto a design firm. And that was
Mhm.
sort of my first, the Cisneros television group in Latin America was kind of my first experience in media. I then got recruited because of the Cisneros television group. They ran the USA Net. They ran AOL and DirecTV and had a bunch of channels. And I ended up getting recruited by the USA Network in Latin America. So I was the head of corporate development, business development. Did that for a handful of years. The guy who ran that ended up, Tom, it's actually Lagardère. Lagardère is the second largest media company in France. And in the States, they owned Elle Magazine and stuff like that. So the guy who was a really good pal of mine went over to Lagardère. I got recruited to run M&A on the digital side. And that sort of got me in the music business because we looked at buying Much Music to be Much Music had a bunch of platforms in Latin America and Europe, and they had a thing called M6 in France. So we were going to build the second largest global music platform to parallel MTV. So I did that for a bunch of years. And where I really got into music when I first became a CEO, it's a French company. If anybody listening or you guys know anything about French companies, they hate Americans. They pretend they like Americans. You go to a meeting and they go, no, I'd never do that. Why would you suggest that? You're an idiot American. So I flew over to Paris every month for about 2 years. Had a great time being in Paris, but every meeting was, no, Victor, we would never do this. So while I was doing that, we were also trying to buy a company. And the two guys who owned the company were Joe Bianco and Anil Narang, who had started a very big music company, and they had invested in a mobile company. So I became the turnaround CEO for a company called Hello Network. And Hello Network was one of the first streaming companies out there, mobile streaming companies. And as Tom said, one of the first things we did, right before Apple Music, there was actually a company called Ritmoteca that was in
I
Miami.
remember it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that was
Yep.
Apple. That was iTunes before iTunes, but just for Latin America. And Warner Music and Sprint wanted to test case what it would be like to have a streaming service. It was when Mike Nash and Mark Bryan were still there. George White was still there. As you know, Mike Nash runs all of digital for Universal on a global basis. So we did the tech and all the rest and cut the deals. It was sort of a good test case, but it was a terrible business case. It was, you could, for $10 a month or whatever it was, you could listen to a 30-second clip of Warner Music on Sprint. And I know that when I'm thinking about music, I go, hey, is there any Warner Music I want to listen to today?
Yeah.
but it was sort of the first test case. So, and
Cool.
that, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying that's cool. I didn't know that
Yeah.
part of it. So
Yeah. And then that just turned into a bunch of after you've been a turn, you know this better than me. Once you've been a turnaround CEO, you know, even though they very rarely work out, and I used to get a lot of gigs, as you know, I would get the worst ones because I'm not married, I don't have kids, I have no legacy. They're like, hey, they're like, Mike, it's like you, yeah, Mike, he'll like it, he'll eat anything. So I used to take these really ridiculous high risk, high wire acts. I got out of a couple and that worked out okay. So I did that for about 5 years. I was living in Miami for about 15 years. And this is where I meet Sloane probably 12, 14 years ago. Right.
mhm.
And so we're all part of this thing called Aspen Live. Now, Sloane hasn't been out for a couple of years, which I'm going to beat the crap out of her about, make sure she comes out next year. So I learned to ski when I was 30. And I skied a lot for 4 or 5 years, and then I stopped. I meet Sloane, and I had a huge crush on Sloane in the beginning, just to be fair. And her boss was like, her partner was like, yeah, she's way out of your league. Don't even think about that. So she starts inviting me to Aspen Live. And if Jen, you know about you, Tom's going, I still have a crush on her. Yeah, I do too. I do too. It's a little weird because she's like my sister now. So it's a little weird on that side. But so Jen knows about this because she's part of our Aspen Live group. So we think of Aspen Live a little bit like the Allen and Company Sun Valley gig in Sun Valley. Yeah, that's media and tech. Very, very cool. Invite only. We like to think it's like that. It's not that cool, but it's pretty damn cool. So Sloane kept inviting me because now I'm a music guy. And I kept saying no because I hadn't skied in 25, 30 years. I figured they've been doing this for 15, 20 years. Everybody's got to be a really good skier. So I finally, Sloane and Jim Louie, who runs the conference, they were like, this is the last time we're inviting you. Show up or don't show up, but you're not getting another invite. So forget it. So I finally bit the bullet. I came out a week before the conference and I went into our ski school where I'm a teacher, a coach now. And I'm walking in, this is 12 years ago, I guess, 13 years ago. But I'm wearing clothes from the late 80s. I've got like a big beanie and a bright color anorak. I look like a jackass, quite frankly. And I asked for an instructor, and I get a guy who almost skied on the World Cup. Now that's like being a Tour de France or, in the Super Bowl. And it's JT. You've met JT.
Yeah.
And he's looking at me going, what the hell is this guy? So I ski for a couple of days. I make like 3 turns. They're better boots, better skis. And I went, this is fun. I could do this. I go to the conference and I'll let Sloane jump in because she is literally responsible for my life. So jump in on the good part of it.
Yeah, I would say, you made it your own, but Victor ended up moving to Aspen. He just picked up out of Miami and moved to Aspen full time. So
and every time we do Aspen Live, everybody stands up like it's an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Hi, I'm Sloane. I'm from Nashville, right? And here's what I do. And so I did this for a couple of years and I finally moved. And the year that I moved, I stood up and said, hi, I'm Victor Siegel. If it wasn't for you guys, my life's a lot less interesting. I'm still in Miami. And Sloane goes, you're welcome, which became the counting call every year. So I moved out here about 12 years ago. At that time, I was running a small cap public company that was trying to roll up an artist VIP service and a ticketing company, basically to create
I remember that.
little AEG that we would have sold to AEG Ticketmaster. And like most plans, that didn't work out well. And I started consulting again. So I brought an RFID company over from Europe to the States for cashless credentials and wallets in the US. I brought over a company that it was a competitor like Atmos Dolby. So for a number of years, what I was doing was basically leveraging my background in music and tech and bringing European music tech companies over to the US. So I did a bunch of those. About 6 years ago, all my friends were like, you have to be a ski instructor. And I kept saying no, because the route in ski instructing is you have to teach kids. And if anybody on this call knows me at all, I'm a giant parrot head and I hate kids. So I kept saying no, as long as I don't teach kids. This goes on and they're like, this is how it works, Victor. You don't have a choice. And I went, I do. I don't have to be an instructor. And after about 2 years, the head of our ski school, who's really one of the best skiers and coaches in the world, basically said, I'm not asking you anymore. I'm telling you. You're teaching. Just don't tell anybody. So, by the way, don't tell anybody what I'm talking about. He said, you don't have to teach kids. So I've been a part-time ski instructor. So I teach our ski season's about 120 days, 130 days. I ski, not this year because of my hip, but I ski usually about 110 days, and I teach maybe half of those days.
It's amazing.
Yeah. All right. So that's how I got here. Sloane's experience. And so I want you to tell everybody about the restaurants and all the rest, but the story that you have to tell.
Oh God, which one?
Your name and
everybody knows
movie.
that by now, but
not everybody knows that.
All right, I'll start it with that one, and then I'll get into the music business because that's way more interesting.
No. The restaurant business, because that's and the bagger and all that stuff, because that's equally as bizarre as mine.
Yeah, so I started my first company at 13 because I wanted to go to Europe for the summer of my 16th birthday. And my parents basically said the only way you're going to do it is if you pay for it. And I knew I couldn't make enough money babysitting. So and I'd been in cooking school. My aunt had a cooking school since I was 10. So I started a catering company and started catering all my mom's society friends' dinner parties. And that led me to go to culinary school later on in life. But I guess I was around 15. Yeah, I wasn't driving yet.
Yep.
I also worked at a local grocery store as a checker. And back then, I'm aging myself, I'm 60, but they didn't have, you had to press keys. You didn't have scanners. You could just run stuff over. And there was a lady who used to come through my checkout line. I had a little smock with my name on it. And she loved my name. And she came through one time and handed me a business card and said, my husband's a filmmaker. And I keep telling him, you ought to use your name in a film. And I was like, okay, this woman's nuts. My dad picked me up, handed the business card, and told my dad the story. We got home, he called, and it was John Hughes. And he said, listen, my wife loves going through your daughter's checkout line and is always talking about her. And I'm writing a screenplay for my next film. And I'd like to use her name as a character in the film. And my dad was like, well, that's cool. And he said, I will give you $5,000 for a college education. So, and I'm Sloane Peterson from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So that's 15 seconds of it.
Wait. And the name is used in a television show, not a movie.
So where I grew up on the North Shore, and Spin Man knows this, but where I grew up on the North Shore, it was just a weird little microcosm where all of John Hughes' films were being made. And a lot of now very famous people grew up. My Catholic high school, the nun in my class was Bill Murray's sister. I went to school with John Cusack and Jeremy Piven.
Yeah, by the way, it's always weird to me that you went to a Catholic school.
I know. Yeah. Well, that's, you want a good education, whether you were Catholic or Jewish, you went to Catholic school. So anyway, so they use Sloane and Entourage is me too. But anyway, so my career really started in the restaurant and nightclub business. I started in the turnaround space for Let Us Entertain You, Ed DeBebeck's and Shaw's Crab House, and then jumped ship and went to Levy and managed 5 of their flagships up and down Michigan Avenue. And I guess really my first experience in the restaurant in the music industry was with Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg. So they had signed a partnership deal with Mark and Larry Levy to open up a chain of theme restaurants called The Dive. And they were yellow submarines that went to a dive sequence, and we had to license music for all of that. So I went to LA for a year and opened up Dive in LA. And then I went to Vegas and lived at the Wynn for a year and opened up Dive at the Wynn.
You know what? It never occurred. I don't think I ever put this 2 and 2 together. Obviously, I knew about Dive, but the design firm that I ran was in LA, was off Sepulveda. So I used to go to Dive I used to go to Dive all the time because we're right next to the LA Sports Club. So if I obviously I didn't see it because I'd have been hitting on you at the time, but I remember going to Dive all the time.
Yeah, that was me.
I'm convinced, other than a lot of the fun we've had since we've become friends, but I'm also convinced that the reason our friendship exists is because we both had these very non-traditional paths in
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
whether it
And
was
yeah.
music or whether it was media, right? Very osmotically, right? Most of the people we know, are recovering label addicts, right? You've been labels
Yeah.
and executives, and
Yeah.
that was never
Yeah.
appealing to you. I got offered label things and TV network things. I was like, I've
No,
already
but I
seen that
loved
movie. I've
working
seen
with
that
them. I
movie
mean,
with them,
yeah, I
with
mean,
them, not
yeah. When I was at Echo, which Echo Music was my first foray into the digital music space. So back then, there were about 5 companies selling music direct to fan before iTunes.
yep,
Right? You
yep.
had Groove Shark and a bunch of those.
TuneCore,
Um, at TuneCore, and we were building fan clubs and
yeah,
selling merchandise and tickets and mining all that data around fan preferences. So we
yeah,
worked with all the labels, and
yeah, yeah,
we had great relationships with them. Yeah.
yeah, and the same.
And
And
then
we
we
ended
sold
up
to
with
Ticket Bastard, and then
the
yeah.
the well,
So we sold to
and then
Ticket Bastard then, and that was the end of it.
yeah, well, and then a really small world because all these things end up converging. So, and my I've got like one side of a ski head and one side of a business music head. But so Aspen Ski Co is owned by the Crown family in Chicago, and there's Vail, which owns a lot of resorts, and they have a pass that you buy for $2,000. You can ski everywhere. And Aspen partnered with a private equity firm and created the Icon Pass, the Icon Pass, and
Yeah.
that has 60 resorts or whatever. And Jared Smith is the CEO, and Jared's the reason we're laughing is Jared was the CEO of North America for Ticketmaster, and so he and I talk a lot now. But one of the funny stories was the guy who was our CEO retired a couple of years ago, and when they were looking to replace him, I was up skiing one day and I bump into Jared. He's in the sun deck, and we're talking, and he's looking around, and Mike Kaplan, who was our CEO, walks over. He goes, "Oh, Victor. Oh, of course you know Jared." I said, "Yeah." He said, "For the record, you did not see us." And I went, "What?" He goes, "Victor, read between the lines. You did not see us here. If you ever mention this, I'm pulling your pass and you're done." So so Jared had the opportunity to come run this company, but he runs, which really made sense. Multi-location, heavy on the ticketing side and all the rest.
Yeah.
So he runs. It's KSL is the private equity firm that owns that. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but I love it's always been really interesting to me. On top of the fact, so I'm going to embarrass you here, which I
Oh,
which
God.
I
Okay.
I love doing.
Oh,
So
no.
and just to be fair, I asked Sloane if I could talk about this because it's a little private. So Sloane, if you guys don't know, is one of the most badass human beings I know. So Sloane has had ovarian cancer for the better part of 30 years. I think it's about 27 or 28 years. So
Mm-hmm.
almost half of her life. She's had 20 or 22 surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
She's just a badass. And I always joke with her. Um, and I, like I know a lot of people who get sick, stick around because they have kids, and I always joke with her and go, "You don't have kids, you have cancer. I'd have checked out a long time ago. You're just you're a lot tougher than me." So she does have cancer, but just to put a coda on that, she's in sort of long-term remission. I actually bumped into somebody who has not ovarian cancer, but is in the same place you are. She has to take her chemo drugs, chemo pills once a
Yeah.
week. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if my life sounds interesting, my life sucks from a
Oh, no. Stop.
comparative standpoint to you. But I do love it. But I do love embarrassing her about this. So the other story we should tell, because it's very heavily on the music side. So we have a mutual friend, Tom, who is Ryan Bitzer. So Bitzer, who runs 800 Pound Gorilla, Bitzer worked for me in a terrible startup, a horrible, horrible startup.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, 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 he is. I agree. I agree. So the funny part, who just, yeah, so you said he's awesome. So Bitzer may be one of the few people who is as big a Seinfeld fan as I am. So I affectionately call him Babu. So there's this episode, Babu, Babu, I will not leave. I will not let you go. So Babu worked for Tim McGraw. Then he worked for me. Then he came back to work for Tim McGraw. And now he's got an 800-pound gorilla. But so Sloane was very, very close and is still really close with Keith. Sorry, I'm losing my mind. Kenny Chesney, sorry. And so
Okay. Yeah.
she launched Kenny Chesney's Blue Chair Bay Rum, and she may be the only person in the world who got a liquor company and a beer company to co-sponsor a tour, Corona. And so the year that they did that, they had a Blue Chair Rum place in every stadium, and we went around the country a lot and drank a lot of rum. And on the last night of the tour, Eric Church was the opening act for most of the tour. And all of us kept going, this is the last time he's an opening act. This guy's just a big rock star. And obviously it's turned out that way. But the last night of every Kenny tour is Gillette Stadium. So we're backstage, and so Eric's done his thing. I can't remember who else was on the tour. Somebody else was. Kenny does his thing, and Eric comes out as the last show and the last song to sing "Put a Drink in My Hand," and everybody drags Sloane out and pours beer over her head on the stadium. Then they drag me out. I'm like, I'm not part of this. So her whole her ability to inculcate herself with very, very sensitive and difficult rock stars is pretty fantastic.
Well, it's helped me. It taught me how to deal with difficult CEOs, which is what I do now. So, and entertainment is still a part of that because
Yeah.
so for most of you guys who don't know, I work mostly in the live event space now. Think on the corporate side, everything from big corporate events from Dreamforce, with Metallica playing there, all the way to Oracle.
By the
I
way,
mean, big events.
how great was that show? How great
Yeah.
was that Metallica show?
So I work in that side of it, which is the same amount of logistics that anybody in the music industry goes through. It's just a different time. And so
Yeah.
now I live more on I can really identify with venue owners, booking
Yeah.
agents, my favorite people ask me live, right? Because that part of the business and we all went through it, right? Anybody working in the live event space when the pandemic hit took it on the chin. So
Sure.
it's come back in such an amazing way, and live events are still that huge piece of the music business. But it's
Yeah.
also a massive industry on the corporate side of the world, on the B2B side of the world.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of where I hang my hat these days. So
It's funny. So in a similar vein, so when I joined All Verified, and I always joke about this. And I'll use this as an analogy. Like, I think I know a fair amount about music in general. A lot of people know a ton more than I do, but I also, my love of music documentaries. So every time I say
yeah,
music doc, even if it's somebody I know, I think, I already know this. And it turns out I know jack shit.
yeah,
What a big Zeppelin fan I am. Becoming Led Zeppelin was fantastic. And I went, holy crap, there's just a ton of shit that I didn't know.
yeah,
And the live sync and the sync business, which is really, really bizarre. And it's a mafia system between ASCAP and BMI. And, hopefully none of those guys are on the phone, are on this call, but it's a
wow,
it's a very opaque business. And, the paying of royalties and how it's distributed and how the broadcasters pay it and all the rest. And it's the same, right? Where you're sort of expanding in a category that you knew well, but most people don't know how large it is. Sort of the same for me. Like the sync business is a multi-billion-dollar business, like below 10 billion, when you factor in licensing and royalty streams and all the rest, right? And I've joked for years, and I didn't know why I was joking about it, but I know now that when bands who have been out on tour for years and years and are 75 years old and shouldn't be touring anymore, when they're on their cusp of stopping the tour, it's when they license their music more, like the
Yeah.
Stones and right? They
It's
license their
also when they
music
start doing private events more, because
exactly,
that's where the money is.
yeah, Springsteen, when he inducted U2 into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he gave this great speech where he said, I have this insanely expensive lifestyle that my wife drives me crazy about, but I also have this overblown sense of myself to feel that I can't sell out, so I don't do commercials. How much money have I left on the table? And he went through the whole thing that Paul McGuinness did. He said, then I saw U2, and they gave away their music on the iPhone for free. He goes, wily Irishman, wily Irishman. But so there's these tangents, right? I mean, when you and I started, you toured to sell albums. Right now, it's obviously the other way around. Now there's not albums. There's it's all digital. So there are these carve-offs of the category that people never paid attention to,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Right. It was like,
Yeah.
I want to be in Billboard. I want to get, I want to play the Garden. And, now, the big revenue is on the ancillary sides of I mean, unless you're Taylor and you're making billions of dollars on the streaming side, right? But for everybody else, right, it's the ancillary businesses. And I find it interesting that both you and I avoided the mainstream stuff, which makes sense given our backgrounds, because I always joke that I'm unhired as a CEO.
I'm unhirable.
I'm completely, I don't even like answering I don't even like answering to a board, right? So I think that I sort of had to end up on the ancillary side because it's the only place that anybody would hire me.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I mean, again, I was lucky enough early in my career, and Spin Man, I already mentioned him, but working for one of the most polarizing music CEOs in Nashville, right? I mean, you can't work with Mark Montgomery and you either loved him or hated him. There was no middle ground.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, working with Mark that's really it shaped my career in ways I never could have imagined. And he and I are still friends today and still have interests together. But I think, that speaks to the fact that I just took the big risks like you did. I took the big swings and wasn't worried about what the outcome would be. I've always somehow figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I figured I could go be an equestrian again.
And, the other thing that's nice about being all the live music experiences in my life, and I'd love to ask you this because I don't think I know the answer to this, but I knew you were a parent, of course. But
yes,
what was your first concert?
It's funny you should ask that question. I asked that question on every gondola. So in case people aren't skiers, to go from the base of the mountain all the way to the top, you get on a gondola. It's a 6-person gondola. So I always ask that question because I'm always interested. So there are two. So being a Jewish kid from the Bronx, I had to go to summer camp in the Catskills, and I've got a couple of years on you. So I went to Woodstock, but I didn't physically go in. So my camp was Camp Olympus, which is a bunch of Jewish kids from Long Island and the Bronx. And Yazgur's farm was about 25 minutes away. And we left and we stood outside, and I heard CSN and Sly and the Family Stone. So kind of my first concert, but my real first concert, my first two real concerts, I went to the concert for Bangladesh at Madison Square Garden. Yeah. So if anybody doesn't know what that was Live Aid before Live Aid.
That was Live Aid before Live Aid. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. A drought and famine in Bangladesh. And Billy Preston, because I had a big Jew fro because I was a giant Billy Preston fan. But it was George Harrison and Eric Clapton and all sorts of people. And then my second concert was Led Zeppelin, How the West Was Won. So I lived about 20. Yeah. So Riverdale was a quick train ride to the Garden. So, and when we were growing up, you'd think nothing about being a 10-year-old and taking the train downtown. right?
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
yeah, now I don't think he'd do that. So I went with a friend who actually his parents had stood outside Tower Records and got the wristbands and
Yeah.
all the rest. And that was my second concert. What about you?
Mhm. So my first concert also was Woodstock. I was a toddler. So my
Yeah.
mom and dad lived in White Plains, and
Yep.
they were hippies, essentially.
Yeah.
And so my first concert was Jimi Hendrix as a toddler.
Nice.
And
Nice.
the cool Nashville connection about that, I think Tom's heard this probably before, is
Yeah,
that
yeah, Tom. Yeah,
his
Tom. We both
band
went.
for
Tom,
Woodstock
we both went to Woodstock. Yes, we
was
both went to Woodstock. Ironically.
no. We've heard the story is that Jimmy's band at Woodstock was actually Nashville session players. It was all made out of
Mm,
up of
mm.
Nashville session players who were playing at that time in a couple of the clubs downtown. But the one I remember the most um, as a youngster was I got to see AC/DC in Ireland, and it was in a
Nice.
castle, and it was like the coolest
Slate
thing
was
ever.
it? Slate probably Slane Castle,
It was Slane
which is
Castle.
which is where Hamish
Yeah,
Hamilton would film. Oh,
yeah,
that's the U2, the
yeah,
U2
yeah,
concert.
yeah. So that was the
Excellent.
one that was the one I remember the most. But I was grounded for I think from the age of 13 until 18 when I left the house, because the first concert I got grounded for was Rolling Stone Steel Wheels because I snuck out of
Got
the
it.
house. And then the
Got it.
second one I got grounded for was Cheap Trick live at Budokan.
Nice. So I've got two good stories around that. So Rolling Stones in particular, and I always love this story. So it's a Michael Cole story. For those of you who don't know, Michael Cole was the promoter for the Stones for 35 years. So
Yeah.
so what was the first major corporate sponsor for any tour?
Oh God, I don't know. I
It's
can't
the Rolling
remember.
Stones. It
Oh, of
was
course
Joe
it
Von
was.
Musk. It was Joe Von
Oh
Musk. Joe
God,
Von
yeah,
Musk. Yeah,
yeah,
Joe Von Musk. And so it was $4 million, which is a lot of money today, but was a shitload of money back then. And the executives came up and said, "Look, we spent all this money. We need to get more shows." Michael Cole
yeah,
sat in his office in Toronto and said, "2 sets of steel." And everyone, what
yeah.
are you talking about? Right? Which seemed
Steel
like a no
Wheels.
steel, hence steel
Yeah, I
wheels.
know.
So that's one.
Yep.
The other, I forgot this story. You know this story. This is actually my first real music experience. So when I was a rider, Linda Blair, as in head spinning,
Oh God.
head spinning exorcist, was a rider. So Linda and I have been friends. We've been friends for 50 years. And back in 76, when I was riding, Linda was dating Ronnie Van Zant and
Yeah.
Leonard Skinner. So that summer, I got to know the guys and they said, "Hey, you should come out on tour with us this summer." So I'm actually almost famous. I did that in 1976, but this becomes I think you know most of the story. So I'm out on tour, 16 years old, and all, as you can well imagine, 16-year-old 1976. So years later, I moved to Miami and I meet a woman named Dana Dowd. And Dana Dowd's father is Tom Dowd. And if anybody doesn't know who Tom Dowd is, Tom Dowd invented 8-track recording. Not like Uncle Milty invented television. He worked on the Oppenheimer project, the Manhattan Project, and Ahmet Ertegun hires him to be the sound engineer for Asylum and Electra. So, and he becomes the sound engineer, and then he becomes the producer of choice. So he did the Allman Brothers Live at the Fillmore East. He did every Clapton album. Literally became that guy. So I meet Dana, and by this point, Tom's in his late 70s, and he's sick, and he lives in Miami. And they had started a documentary on him, and they ran out of money, and Chris Blackwell put in the last $50,000. So,
yeah.
right. So he created Derek and the Dominoes. He literally did. He had just finished Clapton's 1350 Ocean Drive, and Dwayne was playing in West Palm. And Dwayne calls him. He goes, "Is Eric recording? I want to come down and hang out with him." So that's how Derek and the Dominoes came about. And I'll talk about that in a second because there's a documentary about it's fantastic. But I'm going to visit. You know how much I love people who are just great at what they do in whatever industry. So I was spellbound because Tom would tell me stories all the time. And every time I came in, he'd have gold records up on the wall, things that he'd done. And I knew most of them. Live at the Fillmore, AC All My Brothers is like, my favorite one of, other than Buffett, one of my favorite albums ever. And I walk in one day and he's got One from the Road, the green cover, right?
Mm-hmm.
Skinner, 1977. And I went, wow, I knew most of it. I didn't know you did that. He goes, yeah. And then he walks into the bedroom and he walks out with a picture of me and him at the soundboard at the Fox Theater,
Oh, wow.
1976. And I went, oh my God, that's me. He goes, I said, when did you know it was me? He goes, the day you walked in. I've been waiting for you to figure it out. Bizarre.
Yeah, you're so bad at that.
I know. And the funny part is he said, then he said, well, do you remember what recording we pulled off the board for the album? And I went, of course, it's Freebird. That's the night where they go, what song is it you want to hear? Freebird, Freebird.
Oh,
So,
God.
but it was so weird. He just comes out a picture of me at the soundboard with him.
Well, you need to write a book, dude. All right. I know we're getting close to the end of time. I agree with Mark. We could probably talk for another hour at
Yeah.
least. But
Yeah.
when did you fall in love with Jimmy Buffett?
I can't even say. I don't even know when. I went to a Buffett show years and years and years ago, and when I finally moved to Miami, my friends are like, and I'm moving from New York, and they're like, we never saw that coming. I went, I'm a parrot head. I wear parrot shirts and flip flops to work. Are you insane? What was interesting is you would like this. So Mac McAnally on the Margarita Tour and Scott Emick were
Mm-hmm.
here a couple of nights ago, about a week and a half ago. Yeah,
Of course they were. Yeah.
which was the 10th.
Love
So I
Mac.
got one of.
Yeah.
Hey Jen, since you're listening, I keep bugging our friend with the bright red hair to come to Aspen every year. Jen, you got to start bugging her, right? I know you're here. We need to get her to come back to Aspen, don't you think? It's never going to happen. It's
I'll
never
come
going to
back.
happen.
Probably this year. Yeah. I'll
Good.
come back this year.
Now, the next comment from her is going to be, it's time that you come visit me in Nashville. If you come to Nashville, I'll come to Aspen.
Well, I won't hold you to it. We'll wait until we've got our sphere and there's more of a reason for you to come. And you can come.
So as we close this up in a couple of minutes, so be more specific about the things you're doing now. I mean, I know you got a lot of things that you're playing with, but what are the two or three things that you think are most interesting that that drive your passion? Because everything you do, you're like me, like we don't care about money. We do, but it's more passion driven than that.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's two things, right? So one of them is I'm a recovering brand strategist and have been since the time I was 23.
You're not recovering. Talk about your Vienna and that gang.
Yeah,
Nice try.
so I've been
Nice try.
My mentor in the space is a guy named Marty Neumeier, who was Steve Jobs' first brand strategist. So working on the branding side of things, understanding the power of story. For me, that's always been a passion, still is. But I always aired more onto what's the financial side of it, right? Which is part of my turnaround space piece. So I'm actually getting to go to Florence in May to teach a course on finance and brand at that brand school, which is really fun.
Was the last one in Venice? Or were they both in Florence?
The last one was in Venice. No, the last one was in Vienna. And this one's in Florence. So that's a passion project that I'll keep doing until I can't do it. And then the other one is just being back in and around the live event space, but in a little bit of a different category, not surprisingly, right? You talk about us jumping around into the destination management side of it. So when people choose to come to Nashville and choose it as a destination point and creating really interesting high caliber events, because Nashville's kind of on the map now for a lot of reasons, but we're a tourist town still.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
now with, the largest convention center in the Southeast, and with Nissan Stadium being redone, and with, brand new Live Nation venues and all of that, we're getting a lot more interesting folks coming into town and moving,
Mhm.
their corporate events from the traditional cities to
Mhm.
Nashville, which is really cool. So it's fun being in on. Those are the two things keeping me busy, which I really love.
All right. So I have two comments because we're probably going to run out of time. So first of all, if anybody hasn't noticed the leather and the ink, so let's talk a little bit about it. So she has a shitload of ink that she's not going to show you. All right. My last piece is because I say this all the time. Yeah, I love you to death, and that's a given. But what female rock star? This is to everybody else. She knows that's why she's smiling. What female rock star does Sloane remind you of? Just everybody
It,
jump in. It's going to be pretty obvious when I say who it is. But Jen, who does she remind you of? Think of a rock star who's named after a color. Ink. That's a
the
that's a
red hair
Sloane.
version.
Yes, yes, yes. That yeah. Joan Jett, a good one. Yeah, right now with absolutely, absolutely. So Tom, as we're wrapping this up, I'm a shitty friend, so I barely call her. So thank you for finally. And Tom mentioned, I think Tom, did we talk about this year or last? I think it was last year. And initially, Tom's like, "Well, I'll do the interview." He goes, "Wait a minute, I'll get Sloane because she'll just beat you up, and we'll learn way more about you from her than anybody else."
You are a shitty friend, but you're
I
funny
am
as
a shitty
hell guy and one of my favorite humans.
Yeah,
Sloan,
friend.
likewise.
By
Sloan,
the
you're
way,
one of my.
Tom, we never so Sloan. Now that we've done this, right now we actually have to like video each other once in a while, just occasionally, because I don't get to see you that often, but I get to see you this way.
I know.
Well,
Tom,
let me jump in here and wrap it up. Sloan, you're one
yeah,
of my heroes. You've always been one of my heroes. And Victor, I'm so pleased that you shared some of her personal story because
yeah, yeah.
she's a badass. And
She's a
somebody
badass. She's a
commented
badass.
on it in here.
Yeah.
Um, to the audience, I promised you guys would leave here more inspired and enlightened than you arrived. And I know we delivered on that promise. Sloan, another thing that came up today that all of us heard is that you're going to Aspen Live this year, and I can't wait.
I am. I
Peer
am.
pressure is that peer,
No, I meant I
Todd
am. I'd already
and
planned
Todd.
on it. So
The first thing she'll do is she'll walk in and look at me and go, "You're welcome."
Mm, I can hear it now. I can't wait to hear it, in fact. Hopefully, there's
Absolutely.
going to be better snow than there was this past year at Aspen Live, which was terrible.
Here's the weird part of it is it was bad. The snow until about the second week or until after Christmas wasn't great. But it's one of it in my 11 years here, it's probably the worst opening we've had. Now that said, the way I think of snow, the way I think of living in Miami, and I'll give you the analogy there. When I lived in Miami in the middle of the summer, you're living on Mars, right? It's just god awful hot. So, but I stopped asking how hot it was. I'd say, is it 2 showers, 3 or 4 showers? And so, as much as I'd like to have a foot of powder every day, the way I judge snow now is how many days really sucked. And the first, when you guys were in town, and so probably the first 25 days of the year been shitty. But the truth is, there's a lot of ancillary press about we don't have that much snow. We could use more, but the snow that's on the ground has been really, really good. So anybody who's complaining about it, I always say you got to get out of show business. The snow's just fine.
Well said. Well, folks,
thanks, Tom.
I am afraid we are out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. We appreciate it.
So pleased to present both of you on here. And like I said to the audience, you guys got a treat today. I will chime out with my normal sign off, and that is be nice to each other. We need more of that in the world right now. And we will
Love
see
that.
you soon. Take
See
care,
you.
Thanks,
folks.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.